Right, good lovely morning. It is Thursday morning, 7:30 Central Time. Brandy Vines, your host for your Better Than Coffee segment today. Again, 20 plus years in healthcare operations and staffing. I just recently announced I'm the newly appointed Vice President of Client Development at Epic Healthcare. I'm really excited to be leading the cardiovascular and oncology teams with some of the other service lines within that enterprise based out of LA. Super exciting stuff. So I'll be posting a lot more information and details about that fun endeavor. But today, the spotlight is on Mr. Daniel Wright. Um, Dan, if you want to say hello to everybody.
Hi,
Um,
everyone.
um, we'll go through who Dan is, background, etc. But really, the main focus, emphasis of the discussion today is talking about your most important resource in your hospital, your people, and how you keep them engaged. Dear goodness, pandemic, things we've gone through. And as we keep changing and evolving in healthcare, it's one of the things that can easily get pushed to the side and not prioritized. And um, Dan doesn't know this, but Dan was on my team for a very short time frame a couple years ago. And um, I knew him before that, after that, but I had called around to get references on Dan from multiple different people before he came on. And it's just one of the things I like to do, kind of do peek behind the curtain if any clinical executive is going to be leading people that we're entrusted to. And one of the things that everyone kept telling me about Dan is that, oh my gosh, his teams love him. His teams always love him. And if you follow Dan at all on LinkedIn or anything, you can see just the life of Dan and the energy and the care and passion that he has for his staff. So it's one of the reasons I wanted to invite Dan on to talk about this topic. So Dan, thank you again so much for coming on today and being willing to spend your time with us.
Thank you, Brandy.
So as we jump into this, Dan, tell us just a little bit about you. I want to know, I don't know that when you were in kindergarten, and they said your teacher said, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Was it nursing, or is there a story like what did you want to be? How did you get into the idea of nursing? Just talk about your upbringing and childhood for a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think the first thing I said is, "Can I take a nap?" But after, when people were actually when I look at the question seriously, I remember saying "baby doctor." Like that's what I remember saying. Obviously, that did not happen. But and then I remember going through a phase of I want to be an attorney. Well, obviously that didn't happen either. But I think what's interesting is we all have this idea of what success is, and as we get older, we start realizing it's the people. Like, how can you serve people, right? And so for me, is that's what I wanted to be. Was a baby doctor. That's what I remember saying. And then I wanted a nap, and I wanted to play with toys. And that was about it. But I grew up in Canton, Ohio, right outside of Cleveland. And throughout my life, and I think we can all maybe relate to this, is there are things that happen that are great things that happen. My mother is wonderful. She's so loving and kind and giving and puts herself last. And then when I was 7, my parents, they became divorced. And so I had these two different lifestyles that I was leading, and one was very different than the other. And I think what I learned through that, and then there was some childhood trauma in terms of my cousin and I were 6 months apart, but we grew up like brothers. And he had passed when he was 18, when we were 18. And then a year later, I lost my grandmother that I was very close with. So all of these things happen, and you're like, why are you bringing this up? What does this have to do with anything? But it has to do with the fact of there were two things in my life that were really important for me that I discovered. And also, I came out when I was 16 years old to my family and to my friends. And I grew up, my grandfather on my mother's side was a pastor. And so you have this fear of always disappointing because not
Yeah.
living what traditionally people think that it should be. So that combined with the losses that I incurred, the people that I trusted and loved, some of those people I trusted and loved the most, are no longer here, who were big supporters of mine. And so that shaped me into this whole, I don't want to be dependent upon anybody. I want to give back. And I went through a dark time. And I say that meaning because I was trying to be something for everybody. And I wasn't true to myself. I wasn't being true to myself and who I was. And through that period, I was working in an insurance industry. And, I think everybody has a passion. There's a place for everybody in this world. But for me, going through that experience, and it taught me a lot. It taught me fundamentals of leadership. I was in leadership at 21 years old. And through that process of defining who I was, at 29, I said, I'm done living for everybody else. I've got to do something for myself that I know that I can be passionate about and that I am passionate about. And so I cashed my 401k at 29 and put myself through nursing school.
That's awesome. It's always cool to hear the backstory because I think, there's two things to that. One, the vulnerability of leadership, which is, I think, something that, um, you and I were talking about. Like, it's something I struggled with for a while. And it was this mentality of, no, as the leader, you're supposed to have everything figured out and everything perfect. And no, that's not reality. And I think the more that you can lead with a genuine style and caring and just, hey guys, I'm a human just like you are, and there's going to be things that, are hard and tough, but at the same time, just understanding that, like, we've all dealt with our own struggles and situations, and it's about that community, right? Like, and I want to be part of your community and help you, whatever it is that you're going through, personal, professional, and just really help them be the best version of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But going, I guess, well, first, guys, Dan right now, he is the CNO executive at Columbia St. Mary's in Milwaukee. But the other thing, like, I love to talk about is just the different types of situations that you could find yourself leading in, right? Because I completely understand. No one hospital healthcare system is the same, right? They're all different. And I love getting Dan's perspective on this because, Dan, how many different states have you been a clinical leader in? It's a lot.
6.
6 different states. So,
Yeah.
so you've had the ability to see it from, different, from a cultural perspective, or union, non-union, like, what's going on. Depending on where you're leading, even within the same city and state, it could be different from hospital to hospital as you go from one part of a city to another part of a city, in leading. So that's, again, a different kind of, I guess, a view that you're, able to bring to this discussion. One of the things I did want to talk about, there was an executive I was talking to, and he was talking about some of the things that he does every single year to make sure that he stays centered and it takes time for that self-care, because a lot of us in leadership, we just go, and we don't take that time. And if you don't take time to take care of yourself, if you break down as a leader, you're good to nobody, right? And it's, Dan, anytime I talk to you, I see you always just have this joy about you. But that's got to come from somewhere, right? Because that doesn't just happen. You have to make sure you're taking time for that self-care so that you can stay in that right mental mindset to be a good, positive leader for those that you are in charge of. So what is your secret to keeping a good, strong mental mindset?
That's a great question. Medication. No, I'm just kidding. It's not medication. It really comes from the place of, and some of the things that I've talked about already. But for me, what the secret is, I never thought I would be in this position to have this influence. So I get energy from people. And for me, it's being around people. It's making sure I celebrate people and never forget where I came from and all the odds that were against me. That is the mindset. It's faith in addition to that. And then it's just doing things that I enjoy to do it. We could all work 24/7 and never feel that we've become fully accomplished and caught up on everything. But it's really about taking time just for myself, and whether that's going to the spa and getting a massage and my mani-pedi on every other weekend, or if it's just decompressing with my spouse, or if it's just watching mindless TV for an hour, or going out for a walk, whatever that is, whatever I need in that moment, I just take time, just a little bit of time to be able to reset and re-energize.
I think it's even become more important. Like, I mean, through the pandemic, goodness, I think that's the first time as a leader where I was like, it doesn't matter how many hours I work right now, it's not going to be enough. Like, and so just trying to say, like, okay, regardless of where I'm at, I'm taking 30 minutes for myself, like, and you just have to stop because the work's still going to be there, right? It's not going to go away. So, that could, to your point, is it taking that 15, 30 minutes, just go for the walk, recenter, or making sure that you take that time, because again, and especially right now, there's so much work to be done in healthcare, and the work's still going to be there, but take care of you, because if not, you can't lead people.
That's right.
So
That's right. And by the way, Brandy, people are probably wondering why it's so dark in here. It's because you didn't send a glam squad, so I had to make it a little less light in here. So
yeah, I'll have to send you a spotlight. I should have shipped that off to you to Milwaukee.
that's okay.
Okay. One of the things that I want to talk about is, it's kind of a funny story. I was partnered with this executive coach a while back, and it was years ago. But one of the things that, I was really asking for guidance. Like, I'm really trying to make sure my team stays motivated. I'm constantly trying to think of new ideas. Just want to bounce this off of you. Like, any things that you've tried that maybe I should consider. And the executive coach goes, you know what? One of the things that has really worked well for teams that I've led is just a good pizza day. And I remember taking a step back and going, like, you really think as a leader I don't buy my people food? Like, like we've done the pizza days, right? But people want more than that, right? It's got to be more meaningful. You need to really understand at the core what your teams need to feel heard, valued, supported. That's not a pizza day, right? So, like, what is it that you do to make sure that you stay in tune to what it is that your team really needs? Because we all have the employee engagement surveys, right? And some of them are better than others, but I still think at large, a lot of times those really they still don't show you what is it they need and that they're screaming for, right? So, like, how do you stay connected to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of things. One is we have to be authentic, right? Because nothing else matters if you don't create connections. And it's interesting because I actually do have a creating connections that are twice a month here, and I can talk a little bit more about that. But the one thing is, anytime that I go into a new facility is round and just be vulnerable and just be present. Sometimes people tell you things that either you didn't want to hear, you didn't expect to hear, that that you're going to hear, all of these things. And really it's just about connection and just being able to say, you know what, I'm going to meet you where you are. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to let you have what it is that you need so we can create this trusting, safe environment for us as individuals and us as a team. So with that being said, that's the forefront of what we have to do. Create connections with impact, with purpose, with meaning, with authenticity, with humility, with humor. And I say all those things because I'm just myself, and I can make fun of myself. I allow people to make fun of me, sometimes a little bit too much. But it goes back to just being vulnerable as a leader and just saying, you know what,
Yeah.
I want to create this safe space for you, because when you do that and we create this environment where people feel safe to speak up, that is how we're going to move things forward, because we can't change what we don't know. So I just create different venues where people can come to me or I go to them, and we have these conversations and we have these connections. So for me, it's, yeah, the food is nice, short-term win, right? But the
Right.
long term is the relationships and the connections that we build with our team.
Yeah. And I think that's, going back to kind of the humor part of, like, just being real, connecting relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things that, like, I know, just like my leadership style, I couldn't be the polished, buttoned up, super serious 24/7 leader. That's just not who I am, because it is a deterrent to building a good relationship with anybody, right? Like you've got to be real and genuine. And I tell people all the time, like, I'm a nerd. I'm a science nerd. I'm a dork. Like, make fun of me. Like, and I end up being my own punchline, right? Because like I know I'm a dork. Like, but you have to be genuine and real. And then part of that is, I think that it's that comedic relief. I think that also it's healthy for not only your staff or, whoever's, you're leading, but it's healthy for you too, so.
And Brandy,
But
don't you think that, I mean, you look at the history and evolution of leadership, and we all, maybe not so much the newer generation, but some of us who have been around for a little bit, we had this idea of what hierarchical leadership is
yeah,
and how you should be, and polished and tie, and making sure that you have this facade almost of this is what leadership is. I want to break down that wall and I want to change that, because for me, being a leader is being all those things: the vulnerability, creating a safe space, letting people know that you're human. I make mistakes. I'm still
yeah,
figuring things out as we go. And that has to be okay, but we have to be inspiring and motivating and create that culture. So I'm all about
yeah.
breaking walls, and I'm probably one of the most unconventional executives that you will ever meet.
Yep. I love it. Like, what was the Back to the Future thing you guys did recently on
Oh,
the
yes.
post? I loved it. I was like, yes, bring it back to the
Yeah.
80s. So, I
Yes,
love
my
it.
team did a great job.
Okay, so going back to the Back to the Future Mandalorian thing that you guys did. So what was, I guess, if you're looking back and you're thinking about one of the initiatives that you implemented, at one of the hospitals that you were leading, that you look back and you're like, that was something so meaningful to that team. Is there one particular initiative that you can think of?
Yep. I wouldn't say there's one, because I think there's multiple, right? Because you
Awesome.
have different people, different things on different levels. So for
Yeah.
me, it's how do you touch each one of those? And so I say that meaning one of the most meaningful things, and it was very interesting that you do things that you don't realize the impact and the waves or the ripples that it has, or it will take. It was just a few weeks ago that it was one of those days. Like, I'm in scrubs today. I try to be in scrubs as much as possible, because when I'm rounding, I want that connection, right? It's
Yeah.
making sure that people see me as a person, as a nurse, as a caregiver, not so much that executive presence, which is
Executive. Yeah.
important in certain instances, but when I'm rounding, that's not one of those. So I was in a suit that day, and we were passing out and giving out like hot cider, and it was just one of our ways to say thank you, and showing
Yeah.
appreciation, and snacks and so forth. And there was a code that was called as I was standing outside the room, and I immediately just jumped into nursing gear, and was doing compressions in a suit. And that the life that took on, and how people said that was meaningful for them, what was
Yeah.
meaningful for me as well. It's meaningful because for me, this is my passion, is taking care of people, whether that's patients or it's our caregivers. So in that level is being able to step in, and there's been nights where I've come in and I've helped out with staffing because it's been challenging. So I came in, threw on IVs, and did those sort of things. That to me is what we all should strive to do, is not be afraid to do what we ask people to do every day. The second part is creating different venues for people to be themselves and to express themselves. So, I talked about creating connections, which I do twice a month. And that's just for people to come and, serve snacks and drinks and so forth, and say, just come to me, share with me anything that's on your mind. What do you want me to know? What can I answer for you? Do you want to get to know me? Any questions you have? So it's creating those different venues and spaces, whether it's me going to them or them, having these spaces for people to come to me. It's just the connections that I want to continue
Yeah.
to strive for. So those are some of the things that have been meaningful for me.
There's nothing more valuable, in my opinion, than seeing a leader willing to roll up their sleeves and jump in the weeds with their team, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I probably go that way a little bit too much sometimes. One of the things, one of the executives I used to work for used to always tell me, Brandy, you got to stop working in the business, work on the business, right? And you have to, as a leader, you have to come up out of the weeds and you have to work on the business, the operations, and whatever initiative or project you're supposed to be focused on. But at the same time, they need to see that you're willing to get in the weeds, help them when needed, and show that like I'm not above this, right? Like I'm not above doing the things that you have to do that I ask you to do every single day. So I think that is crucial. Awesome.
Well,
I love that.
and when we're at so one of the things that I talk about to my team and to nurses and PCTs and nurse interns, everyone that I interact with, is remember that I can't sit here in a boardroom and advocate for nursing if I don't hear, feel, and see what's happening. So that to me is important, because the day that I'm sitting in an office making decisions for people and I have no idea what's going out there because I've lost touch with reality, then I shouldn't be in this role.
Yep. And I think that's the reality of a lot of clinical executive, not even clinical, any executive right now, is that, you can get behind that desk and you can get there at 6 a.m. and wake up, you look up, oh my gosh, it's dark outside, right? Like you've been behind your desk the entire day, you have to prioritize it, because you can, but again, going back to the fact, there's so much work to be done right now. You're never going to get it all done. It's always going to be there. If you don't prioritize that time to get up, get out behind the desk, get out there with your people, it won't happen. You have to make it a priority.
Absolutely. And then the intent behind it too is people don't always see the intent of what you're doing, right? You have to make sure you close that gap, because as I'm saying, I believe in everything that I say and everything I'm doing, but it's also making sure, is that translating over to people? Are they receiving that? Are they hearing that? Are they seeing that? So it's not just our intention can always be great, and it's just making sure, is it landing correctly? And that's something as an executive I always reflect on, is what I'm doing really being purposeful and meaningful.
And then I love the having the conduit for people to come to you, because there's a lot of leaders that will say like, oh, I have an open door policy, right? Like I have an open door policy. But if you're not actually creating the space for it, then does it ever really happen? And being the leader that proactively makes that space in that time, I think is also another huge kudos to you, because again, saying it versus actually making the time are two very different things. When you evaluate, you've got this massive staff, right, in a hospital, and you've got all these unit managers, unit directors. And one of the things that, I have concern about in healthcare right now is there's so many leaders that, were a charge nurse before COVID. And because of turnover, burnout, early retirement, there was people that have been thrust into director level positions within a short time frame. And even though that they have the clinical know-how, like they haven't been polished as a leader, how to really care and make sure that unit is engaged. And it's a gap that I feel like we have right now in healthcare. And how do you make sure that, just as passionate as you are about the employee engagement and keeping your staff dialed in, how do you make sure your managers, directors, like everybody under you, that you have the right leaders under you?
That's a great question. One is making sure that they have the tools and resources to be successful. And there's not a secret to it. One is connecting with them, providing that feedback to them, setting clarity and expectations with them. But more importantly is finding out, why are they a leader, right? Because you have to, if you don't have a passion about leading others and developing and creating this culture and sense of excellence, not just in patient care, but engagement, there's going to be a struggle there and there's going to be a gap. So you have to be passionate about what you do. And one of the phrases that I always use is prosper in your passion. Find that, and I will help you get there if this is not it. And that has to be okay. And again, it goes back to that humility and openness and vulnerability to have those conversations and people to feel safe to say, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. Okay. Maybe it's not. So what is for you? And let me help you, because I want you to genuinely succeed and excel, because if you do, everybody else will. So it's, for me, it's just having those open conversations, but providing those clear expectations. And as a leader, I ask for them for that. I'm like, just last week in the directors meeting, I said, do you feel that you have clarity on where we're going? Do you understand our priorities? And making sure that we stay tight knit on what's important to them, what's important for us, and then how do we use that to move forward?
And that's, I think you hit the nail on the head there. We're like, it's the leaders that maybe they don't even want to be a leader, right? Like, it's like you got asked and persuaded and pushed to do this, but like, why are you a leader? Do you want to do this? And I tell people all the time, like, leadership can be awesome, but it's got its days where you're like, like, am I sure I really want to do this? And that's when you really have to know why it is that you're doing it, because that's when you have to dig in deep to that, that passion. What is it about leadership that is your why? Because you got to hold on to that in those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, today is the day I'm hitting my head against the brick wall. So
Yes. You know what, Brandy, real quick, what was interesting is because I'd been in leadership prior to nursing, when I became a bedside nurse, I remember thinking to myself, I don't ever want to be a leader. I don't want to be in leadership again because I love taking care of patients. But then I kept doing things and things kept happening to where I said, all right, if it's God's will, it is what it is. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it passionately. And I want to make sure that I can exceed for the team to exceed so our patients have better outcomes.
Yeah. And I think, you start to realize that, wait a second, I can make even a larger impact. Like it's about the impact and meaningfulness of what you do every day. And if you're passionate about it, it's like, oh my gosh, my reach can go further, in leadership and how I can impact, whether it be your staff or those patients or, whatever it is that you're touching through your leadership. So
Absolutely.
Okay, coming from healthcare staffing world, and leading emergency response through the pandemic for HCA, and doing all the things for emergent staffing. One of the things that I see done very differently across multiple healthcare systems that I've supported and my teams have supported with staffing and bringing in clinicians is the adoption of a travel contract nurse, right? And there are some units where, I'm just going to say toxic culture, right? Where it's you bring somebody in and they could either be, it could be polarizing, right? Like they could either have a major impact on helping change the culture of a department for positive, or they can be sucked into the toxicity, right? And bring it even spiraling down further. And I've seen hospitals bring in those contract nurses or staff in a very positive way, embrace them, and it actually, they just get wrapped into, engulfed into the culture, that the positive culture of that hospital. But I've also seen the opposite. And what is it that you do either yourself or, I guess, preach to your leaders, like how to make sure that as you bring anybody in, it could be PRN staff, right? Like whoever it is, that they equally feel valued and part of the team.
Couple of things. One is I meet with every traveler who comes into our facility for assistance, and I'm honest with them. And I say, here are the challenges that we're facing. But first and foremost, I thank them for allowing this opportunity for them to come to serve with us. So I sit down with them. I bring a little swag bag and just say thank you and how grateful I am for them. And I say, I want to get to know you as a person and as a nurse. So tell me about yourself. And so I spend time getting to know them as people. And why they're here, and just telling our story of where we've been and where we're going, and helping remind them that they are part of our work family when they're here, and we're caring for our community. And when our community comes and needs our care, they don't know that someone is a traveler or they're permanent or they're a contracted service. They don't know those sort of things, and it doesn't matter. Only thing that matters to the patient and the family is that we're providing that compassionate, high quality care. So for me is getting to know them and then asking them, saying, what, you've probably had different travel positions throughout. If there's something that we're not doing, let us know. I want feedback. I want to hear from you. So it's creating that space to where they also feel that they can be that they are part of our team and part of our family.
And I think, taking that even a step further, and this doesn't matter, Dan, if it's contract travel nurses come in or your perm staff, nurses can come in easily within a few shifts, say like, oh my gosh, this is a patient safety concern, or this isn't structured in a way where I feel safe with my license, or there's things that immediately can come up from a clinical perspective. Like, what is that conduit for your nurses and your staff and your teams to be able to escalate concerns and in real time to be able to get support?
Yep. So there's different venues. Obviously, everyone has, a reporting system and mechanism. Yeah. But for me and it's interesting is, that you're creating a culture where people don't mind coming to admin. And I
Mhm.
say admin saying it's not a really secret place or a cave or anything. It's like it's open for anybody. But when they come and they'll say, "Hey, is Dan here? Can I let him know something?" That to me, yes, it can sometimes be overwhelming because when you have 600 plus people and you're creating this culture that people just you can come to your office and want to tell you things. That is
Yeah.
important, and that to
Yeah.
me tells me that we've been successful in the creating a culture that where people feel that they have a voice and that they're being heard. So for me, it's just creating those spaces and the rounding and hearing things, and people aren't afraid to tell you how they feel. That to me is success as a leader.
Absolutely. And what is it? Probably gonna butcher this phrase you're saying, but like they say, like when your top performers, your top employees stop talking, that's when you know you have issues, right? And so,
Yeah,
it goes right in line with what you're saying. Like if you have the right culture, people aren't afraid to kind of speak up and tell you where the pain points or issues are. So, yeah, that's awesome. I, sometimes you get that line out your door, people like waiting to talk to you. And you're to your point, it can get overwhelming, but you want it. You want
yes,
that because if you don't have that, you don't have that open culture that you need.
correct.
So
But the important thing too is not just listening, but it's what are we doing to help mitigate that. So
yeah, yeah,
it's
absolutely.
communication. Communication obviously is challenged, and I'm not saying things are perfect here or they're not perfect anywhere, but the most fundamental thing we can do as leaders is listen and respond
Yeah.
appropriately and take action.
Yeah, action is key. And sometimes the action, it may not be something you can act on right then and there because it may not be the priority, right? But saying, hey, I completely understand this is why it can't be priority right now, but it's on the list. We're going to address it. This is how we're going to address it. Like and again, explaining the why. I think that's a huge thing that people miss. They listen, but they don't. The action and the why, it's not there that follows up. So
Absolutely.
awesome. All right, Dan. Anything else? Any other parting, nuggets of wisdom about how to keep staff engaged?
Just keep real. Just be your
Yeah,
authentic self. Be vulnerable. Have fun. This work is hard. It can be challenging. It is challenging, but it can also be fun and inspiring and motivating. Don't ever lose focus of who you are and where you're going, and enjoy it along the way. It may be get bumpy along the way, but it can be fun and it can just be one of the best experiences of your life. So never give up. Keep focused and keep being real.
so if you are in healthcare and you're anywhere near Milwaukee, the Columbia St. Mary's Hospital, part of the Ascension Healthcare System, you can come work for this guy because he's amazing. So,
Come on. I'm ready.
um, but we really, really, really appreciate you popping on, Dan. I know your schedule's busy and you probably have 5,000 other things you got to get to today. But it was a joy and a delight to talk to you today. And I hope everybody else that has tuned in and enjoyed it as well.
Thank you,
All right.
Brandy. It's always great to talk with you. I appreciate our time together.
Likewise. Bye, Dan. Bye, everybody.